So good afternoon. Program this afternoon. I'll give a talk for about 45 minutes, and then be half an hour meditation, and then question and answer session. The revival of Buddhism in Sri Lanka towards the end of the 19th century was much thanks to a group of theosophists, Colonel Olcott and her companions. And one of the salient features of the way that Theravada Buddhism was presented at that time and place was very much conditioned by the need to provide a clear contrast to the teachings being propagated by Christian missionaries. So the tendency was to emphasize the rational elements of Theravada Buddhism and try to hitch Buddhism to the dominant, preeminent intellectual force in society of science, modern science, and to present Buddhism as a rational religion as opposed to superstitions of Christianity. So one result of that was that the non-rational sides of Theravada Buddhism were rather devalued, and the evident and impressive intellectual satisfactions of studying Buddhism tended to be, in my view, overemphasized. And the fact that any real progress in Dhamma requires a balance between the intellect and the emotions was rather overlooked. So I think that Buddhism has sometimes suffered, if that's a good word to use, from an over-emphasis on the intellectual aspects of the teachings. For instance, chanting is not a favorite practice of most Western Buddhists, and the devotional sides of Buddhist tradition, which are so evident and which are so strong in Asian countries, tend to be devalued or looked upon as kind of secondary, subsidiary practices, not the real thing. And with chanting, for instance, and many modern Thais also feel some frustration on, chanting words that you don't understand. Why? What's the purpose? What's the benefit? And that question is usually really meaning, what is the intellectual benefit from it? And that, of course, is not the point. The point is to create certain desirable emotions. And the role of emotion, of positive emotion, in Theravada Buddhist practice, something I thought I'd say a few words about today. The Buddha, in one of the suttas, teaching the monks how to deal with fear arising in lonely places, would often suggest that the monks meditate on the virtues of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, in order to give rise to feelings of bliss and enjoyment. It's like spiritual enjoyment, if you like, which would replace those feelings of fear. In the traditional list of 40 meditation topics, the group of 10 meditation topics called the Anusati meditations, I don't think get the attention that they deserve. These meditations are based upon using the thinking mind in order to stimulate positive emotion. And a positive emotion that arises from a disciplined and focused discursive reflection on particular Dhamma topics can take the mind beyond the realm of, beyond the influence of the hindrances to meditation in a very swift and effective way. For instance, reflecting on one's good actions, the things in our life that we have done that we feel a sense of wholesome pride and accomplishment, acts of kindness, generosity, self-sacrifice, helping others, acts of service. All these wholesome, noble actions that we have performed in the past can be recalled, brought to mind in the present, and create within the mind a sense of joy and bliss, which has the power to remove mental agitation, depression, and all of the mental defilements or toxic mental states, which preventing the application of other meditation techniques such as mindfulness of breathing, for instance. So the first time we do a meditation like this, it's good to spend some time just writing down points that come to mind, things that we're particularly proud of in our life. They have to be good and wholesome things, not like making a lot of money or something like that, but something which is selfless, kind, good, virtuous. And then say we came up with a list of some 10 points, then say giving yourself 3 minutes just to think about each of those points for 3 minutes. And so the discipline there is to keep your mind within that topic, rather than focusing on a particular physical sensation, such as the point at which the breath contacts the tip of the nose, for instance. We relax that a little bit and have the mind dwell on a particular topic which is clearly circumscribed, and the effort to maintain one's mind within that topic is often a more effective way of calming the mind than stopping or trying to avoid thinking at all through meditation on a particular physical sensation. Now, if we reflect for 3 minutes on each of 10 topics, you've got 30-minute meditation there, and by the end of that time, your mind should be very relaxed and feeling very good. And at that point, one can turn the mind back to the meditation on breathing, for instance. It will often occur that there will be one particular point in those 10 points, which is that just brings up a lot of joy, and you may even feel tears in your eyes, just remembering that. And then you can just take that one point, that one topic, that one event, and allow your mind to dwell on it, and you learn skill in stimulating that particular sense of joy and bliss. And this is a very effective, skillful means for dealing with an unruly, stubborn, recalcitrant mind. It softens the mind and makes use of something that we already have within us. The sense that, the fact that we perform good, kind, selfless actions is because within us we do have this sense of the nobility and the beauty of such actions. We have an appreciation of goodness within us. And so from that appreciation of goodness to the appreciation of particular acts of goodness that we have performed is extremely uplifting to the mind. So remember that the whole realm of samatha practice, of training the mind, is finding effective means of preventing the arising of unwholesome dhammas, vaccinating the mind against them, as it were, and of dealing with or reducing the power of undermining and eventually eliminating unwholesome dhammas, finding ways of bringing wholesome dhammas into the mind and developing skillful means to care for them, to nurture them, and to bring them to maturity and perfection. So this is the underlying structure of our practice, and we need a certain flexibility and creativity in our approach to that. If we have a very fixed idea, this is meditation, this is my practice, this is what I do, then it will tend to be too rigid to be able to deal with the various challenges that arise throughout our daily lives. So this ability to tap into powerful, positive emotion is an extremely important, skillful means. Another one of these reflections is on sila. To recap on the topic of sila or morality, Buddhist morality has some unique features when compared with the moral codes of the great theistic traditions or the monotheistic religions, in that there are no commandments. There is no concept, no idea of a creator, God, who lays down a moral code which human beings should obey and conform to. There's no reward and punishment. There's no prayer for reduction of the results of the unpleasant results of unwise actions. In Buddhist tradition, morality is considered a training. It's a way of educating or training our conduct. And it's based upon simple observable truths, facts of human psychology. And that is that although we cannot, through an act of will, prevent ourselves thinking unkind, unwholesome thoughts, we do have within us a capacity, and one which can be trained, to refrain from acting upon those impulses. So we say as a practical standard for a harmonious and livable community, or from the smallest community, meaning family, up to society, this is the principle on which it's based. That is, that we can all agree on certain standards of behavior. And then, although we cannot promise anyone, we cannot promise ourselves that we won't, for instance, ever think that we would like to commit violence against another human being, whether it's physical or verbal violence, we can promise to ourselves and others that we will never act upon those feelings. And so when we live in a community in which everyone makes that commitment, then we feel sense of safety and security and mutual respect, because it's a workable standard. So this means we voluntarily, and the key word here is voluntarily. Buddhist morality or sila has to be voluntary. If we are refraining from harming, from stealing, and so on and so forth, merely through fear of punishment, or social exclusion, abandonment, or whatever, then although there would be positive effects on the mundane social level, this would not be considered sila in the Buddhist sense. So sila has to come from the wisdom, the understanding of the value of keeping precepts, of training or educating our conduct based upon those precepts. And it has to be also protected from cravings, from desires, from conceit, which can easily distort sila. So the Buddha, for instance, said if someone leads a good, wholesome life, keeps precepts, but on the basis of his or her morality, looks down on people who don't keep precepts and considers himself or herself as superior to them, then that person is a fool and has missed the whole point. So sila is something which is a practical tool to create the kind of community and society that we all want to live in, where we feel safe, secure, valued, where we are free to give and receive love and affection, and one in which the supporting conditions allow us to practice the Dhamma, to develop ourselves most effectively. So if we're living in unsafe environments where we feel insecure, where we feel we have to always have looking one eye over our shoulders, never feeling that we're completely safe, then the state of mind in which we feel secure enough to let go of internal, quite subtle attachments won't arise. And I think this is, again, I was just very important point that intellectual understanding of meditation techniques and the sincerity and integrity in applying them will only take us so far, because if we lack the emotional stability and sense of well-being, then we'll reach a wall. It's the wall of fear, because we we lack the confidence, we lack the faith, if you like, to jump off the edge of the cliff, as it were. There's defilements, the very word, it's not such a good translation, really, but the sense of negative mental states as being negative mental states, or as being defilements, or as being toxic in any way, is something that, as Buddhists, then we can accept as a basic kind of intellectual principle underlying our practice, for sure. But again, there is it's something else again to perceive, to recognize, to have this direct experience of mental states as being a sullying or a distortion or a disturbance of the mind. Here we see the role of samadhi very clearly, because samadhi gives us a limited, perhaps only temporary, access to pure mind, to an unsullied mind. And it's only when we have experienced that sense of purity and clarity, peace, stability, flexibility and strength of mind, which is the characteristic of samadhi, that when negative mental states arise, there is this immediate perception of them as being a sullying or a dirtying or a defilement of mind. So it's not that we just the recognition or the acceptance of greed, hatred, delusion, all these things is bad, but it's to see the psychological and moral effect of these mental states. And the practice of samadhi, although it does not directly remove defilements, that's only possible through vipassana, through panya. Being able to see them in their true light, or to be able to recognize them, having passed through a state in which they are absent, but not just absent in the states of forgetfulness or sleep, but one in which one has felt extremely or most alive one's ever felt, but completely free from or empty of all those negative mental states in which we have formerly identified so strongly as part of who we are. That our whole view of ourself and of our life is turned upside down. This is why strong samadhi experiences are often confused with states of enlightenment, because it is quite a drastic reordering of one's whole understanding of who one is and what one's life is and what one's doing in one's life. So here I'm trying to emphasize the emotional value, the emotional import of developing samadhi. It gives this sense of inner stability, this kind of mountain-like, rock-like imperturbability of mind. And it allows us to see defilements as not an inherent part of who we are, but things which arise and pass away, or come into the mind and stay for a while as guests of the mind. Although this is not yet the wisdom level in which can completely eliminate those causes and conditions, but it's seeing the conditioned nature of defilement through experiencing the peace and the happiness and the sense of naturalness and brightness and clarity of the mind which is without defilement. For this reason, the Buddha at one point said, if you want to have some kind of inkling or some kind of idea of what Nibbana is like, then the state of samadhi will give that to you. It's not Nibbana, it's not enlightenment, but it just gives you like a preview, just a tiny idea of what it might be like. So dealing with defilements, the thinking mind, the power of wise consideration is a fundamental element. The ability to benefit from those things which are beneficial. So the Buddha puts samadhi, right view, at the beginning of the Noble Path, and the two most important causes and conditions for the arising of right view, so for us to enter upon the path, are good or conducive environment, and in particular this refers to the good friend or the Kalyana Mitta. And secondly, that's the external factor. And the internal factor is wise consideration, the ability to digest, inwardly digest the teachings, the examples, the information that is flowing into the mind through the sense doors. The ability to reflect upon experience is greatly emphasized. But the wise consideration, again, there's two channels. The first channel is follows the path of reducing the negative emotions and producing and cultivating positive emotion. So the wise consideration of, or recollection, disciplined recollection of the good actions that we performed in the past, or our sila, is using the thinking mind, but with the result of creating changes in the emotional weather of the mind, the emotional environment of the mind. Whereas the other channel through which the wise consideration flows is through direct interest in appreciation of the impermanence of life, of the unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence, and of the selfless nature of phenomena. So those things which are providing a bridge to or a foundation for wisdom or vipassana. So going back to that with the sila again that I spoke about, when we have taken on precepts voluntarily and taken them on as a training of a mind, then when we recollect the 5 precepts one by one, and when we can recognize that even though on some occasions we were sorely tempted, and we were in environments in which it would have been a lot easier and there would have been no criticism if we'd broken a precept, that we managed to sustain our commitment to the precept through our mindfulness, our patience, through our commitment to this training, then joy arises in the mind. So the precepts, keeping the precepts, the bringing to mind in a disciplined, ordered way our experience in keeping precepts purely, keeping them without allowing conceit or craving for any kind of reward from keeping precepts. It's there. Positive emotion, sense of well-being, sense of bliss, piti, arises in the mind. So goodness that we perform is never lost. I mean, if goodness is there, and when we bring it to mind in the present moment, it can have very strong positive emotional impact, and that power of positive emotion can be used as a tool, and we can fine-tune that tool, and we can cultivate our skill in using that tool to the extent that when we have problems in the application of, say, the mindfulness of breathing, or in other areas of our practice, or we're just feeling down or depressed or overly burdened by our faults, our mistakes, then we can see this as a problem to be dealt with using the vast array of skillful means which the Buddha provided us. So the other wise reflection, which is a very powerful effect, of course, is the recollection on death, on the certainty of death, certainty of our death, but the uncertainty as to when exactly we'll die and how we'll die. And this brings up a sense of appreciation of our life, appreciation of those around us, appreciation of time, and allows us to cut through a lot of the things that we choose to spend our time on. I was just now speaking with a Thai group downstairs, and was saying that once we start on this path of practice, it doesn't take long before we have this sense of wholesome, intelligent sense of shame and reluctance to act in selfish, manipulative ways, or we shrink back from violence and anger and these kind of coarse emotions. But the thing that's most difficult to let go of are the things which are not particularly bad in any conventional sense of the word, but which eat up time. We just kill time. We waste so much time, even though we constantly list the lack of time as one of our great sufferings in life, or problems, that we don't have enough time. And yet when we soberly look at exactly how we spend our time, we generally have to agree that we do spend a lot of time on quite trivial pursuits. And so the sense of what is trivial and what is substantive, or what is really worth making sacrifices for, and what just sort of drags us off in this pleasant kind of haze of sort of enjoyment, but just enough enjoyment to keep us going on to the next interesting thing. Through the recollection of death, our appreciation of, our interpretation of what matters and what doesn't matter, what's important and what's not important, is transformed. So the emotion is not something to be looked at in a purely negative way, or emotion disturbs the mind, prevents us from seeing clearly, it's a bad thing. Yes, certain negative emotions definitely do perform that unfortunate function in the mind. But emotion can be used in a very creative and important way. And since the role of faith, Buddhism doesn't give faith that preeminent role that it holds in theistic traditions. Faith is considered to be a tool to be used in this training or education, but one which must have the wisdom faculty overseeing it so that it doesn't degenerate into either fanaticism or superstition. But its positive effects are that it clarifies. It clarifies our path in life. What we're going to commit to. And if you often, I think most people will agree that when we have difficult decisions to make in life, often we marshal the arguments, the pros and the cons, and we go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. But in the end, when we finally make a decision, it's, to be honest, it's not really because the arguments, the pro-arguments outweigh the cons, or the cons outweigh the pros. It's just we get fed up with the whole process and we just go for it. And that's really a leap of faith, if you like. But without that, life just becomes too complicated. There have been cases of people in serious car accidents who've had brain trauma, and the area of their brain which affects emotional responses to experience is destroyed. So these people become like Mr. Spock. They don't have any emotion. If you're a Star Trek aficionado or someone who finds emotions just quite threatening or disturbing, you would think, well, that'd be quite kind of good way to live life. But it turns out that people who suffer this brain trauma become almost completely dysfunctional. They'll go to a supermarket and look at 5 or 6 different brands of one particular thing, and they can't decide. They choose, should I have this one or that one? Well, this is slightly different, and that's like... So it just... and it exposes the extent to which we don't actually make these rational decisions. It's more, just responding to maybe the color of the packaging, or whether it's on our eye, same level as our eyes, or lower, higher, or whatever. But when this emotional reaction to phenomena is recognized and channeled, it means we see that there are so many different things that we could spend time on in our life. And if we were to evaluate them in a purely rational way, there'd be no end to it. But there's that point where we just decide, well, I'm going to go for this. This is what faith does. It just clarifies, it simplifies, it chooses a path. So if we can educate that through reflecting on Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and develop that emotional relationship to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, then this is very fortifying for the Dhamma practice. When I was a newly ordained monk, and I was very fortunate to have the chance to be personal attendant to my teacher, Ajahn Chah, once. And he said something to me which I won't forget. Well, in fact, don't forget anything he said to me, really. But in this particular case, he said, my name is my lay name was Sean, but he used to have his own pronunciation of English names, so he called me Chon, which means spoon. So he said Chon. He said, Chon. He said, if you knew how to bow, you'd have tears in your eyes every time. If you really knew what you were doing, if you really knew the meaning of Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha, and you really felt that when you bowed, you'd have tears in your eyes every time, he said. So that, this is something we really need to, I think, recognize that spiritual life and life of a monk as well, we need to enjoy it. We need to be having that emotional satisfaction. If monks lack, no matter how intelligent monks are, and they've learned, they know all the books, they've studied Pali and everything, but if they don't have that love for the Dhamma, love for monk's life, love for this institution of the monastic life, then sooner or later they can become vulnerable and may end up leaving the order. And commitment to meditation is the same. If it's I'm going to put so much effort and I want to see such a result at the end of such a length of time, you're very disappointed. And it's not really possible to make those kinds of calculations or to run with those expectations. But when we find a sense of love and satisfaction, enjoyment of the path itself, and treading the path, and just feeling that sense of being so honored and so wonderful to have this chance to try this out. Not saying I have to be able to experience such a level of peace and understanding and so on to make this worth my while. But when you have that sense of emotional commitment, which is not completely irrational, it's based upon this wise consideration. So there's not this separation, these two are feeding into one another. Then that will give the ability to sustain one's practice through periods where things are not going very well, where there's a lot of problems, or particularly if you've had a period in which your meditation has gone very well, then if there's a period where it falls apart a bit afterwards, that's most difficult to take. And this is general psychological principle. You see this on a social level. That if a group of people have been oppressed in a society and then their condition improves, and then after a while it declines again, even though the regress is still far better than the original state of which they were able to endure. This sense of having lost something they gained is intolerable. This is background for riots in many countries, or in the 60s in the LA Watts riots and so on and so forth. So always being very careful not to take anything for granted, and not to think because things are going well now that they should get better and better. This is not like Stairway to Heaven, it's more like snakes and ladders, and you have to be really prepared for that. So when you have that sense of just feeling this is just the opportunity to put effort, just the opportunity to practice in this way. Is when you really feel that as an uplifting feeling, and being able to deal with the emotional ups and downs with emotional wise use of positive emotion. And then there's more of a sense of a smooth path, so progressing smoothly over an unsmooth path. So there are so many pitfalls and so many defilements, and from very coarse defilements until very refined and subtle defilements. And so as you progress, you think things are getting better, but it's just like another layer of ignorance and defilement to deal with. So if the mind is caught up with results and wanting to see this sense of constant kind of rational progress, then it can be very difficult. But if we take our sincerity and our commitment to Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and to this training of body, speech and mind, and to trying to apply the principles the Buddha taught us as best we can moment by moment, then I think that in the long run only good will result. So I've been speaking for 45 minutes now, and I think I'd like to end the talk at this point. So okay, so we're going to have a period of meditation for 30 minutes, and then there'll be a short break, and then we'll question, answers, discussion session. So in the practice of meditation, as a begin with foundation of right view, right understanding, and right intention, right thought. These are beginnings of the Eightfold Path. So right view means that we are clear in our mind that we are devoting 30 minutes to developing the path of practice, to putting effort into development of mindfulness, clear comprehension. We're going to be using the breath as the tool, awareness of the breath, and that during this period we will not take delight in, we will not welcome thoughts of the past or the future. That is to say, memories, expectations, fantasies. Although we can't prevent those things from popping up in our mind, we can be firm in our resolution not to give them a home, not to add on to them, merely to allow them to rise and pass away. So the right intention here is we are trying to put forth our best effort with each and every breath that we take. We can take each breath as the unit of meditation. So this is not strictly speaking, a 30-minute meditation, but a meditation of many consecutive breaths. Every breath is a new breath. Every breath is a chance to start again, re-establish attention, and to create a continuity of awareness. Now the practice is a training of the mind, but part of the education, part of what we're seeking to learn in our meditation is the various ways in which the mind and the body condition each other, affect each other. So we sit in the posture which is most conducive to the cultivation of awareness and clarity of mind. And that means a posture which is as straight as possible, but without straining or without being too tense. And the measure here is that the breath should enter, leave the body in a natural, unforced way. So if the breathing is troubled in any way or unnatural, then just experiment to find a way in which you feel that the breath is normal, natural, and pleasant. Keeping the body as still as possible also helps to encourage that sense of inner stillness. A good way to begin meditation is to develop some body awareness, because concentrating or inclining the mind to the awareness of the breath at one particular point in the body, such as the tip of the nose, can be counterproductive if it's too premature, if the mind's not really ready to do that. It's quite a refined level of meditation. So initially what I would like to suggest is that we are aware of the sensations in different parts of our body which arise together with the in-breath and the out-breath. So as aware of the in-breath as in-breath, out-breath as out-breath, but acknowledging all the feelings, the sensations that are arising in the following areas of the body. So we divide the body into 4 parts, and we begin by being aware of all the feelings, sensations that arise in the head and neck area as we breathe in and we breathe out. So not visualizing the head, not looking for, just being aware to whatever is there naturally in the head and the neck. And the second area is the shoulders and arms and hands. So it's a breathe in and breathe out, being aware of whatever sensations are present. Shoulders, arms, hands, fingers. And the third area of the body is the torso, including the chest, the belly, the back, from the neck right down to the hips. All the sensations that arise with a general expansion and contraction that we can feel so clearly in the torso, together with the breath. Now the lower part of the body, the bottom, the legs, the knees, shins, calves, ankles, feet, toes, all the lower part of the body, the sensations that we can experience that are just naturally arising together with the in-breath and the out-breath. And the fifth and final section is the whole of the body, from the top of the head to the tips of the toes, without choosing any particular area or any particular part of the body. As we breathe in, breathe out, being awake to all the mass, the pattern, the flow of sensation within the physical body. So these are the 5 areas: the head and the neck, shoulders, arms and hands, the torso, the lower body, and then the whole body. And we can use that as a basis for being present to the breathing process for a number of times, going through one by one, may perhaps 3 breaths on each area or 5 breaths on each area. When the mind is starting to settle down and finds it a little bit tiresome to be constantly changing the focus, then we incline the mind to be aware of the sensation of the breath at a particular point in which we can recognize it most clearly, where it's most apparent, where we feel a sense of ease and comfort. So if we are to develop the attention on that particular point, and there is a sense of interest and enthusiasm, then we have the most important conditioning factor for the meditation in place. And then we continue. We may use a mantra to help the mind stay with the breath, such as Put on the in-breath, To on the out-breath, or can count the breaths, or merely be aware of the sensation of the breath without any other helping technique. But if the mind becomes very dull, or feels constricted, or is still a lot of resistance to being with the breath at that point, then we can return to the more relaxed, open way of being aware of the breath together with the sensations in the different parts of the body. As you're aware of, if you've moved your awareness to the recollection or mindfulness of the breath at one particular point, try to observe and to catch that sense of ease and enjoyment that arises whenever the mind is present to its object. And be very conscious of that, because that sense of ease and enjoyment provides the bond which allows the mind to stay with the breath. Because when the mind realizes that mindfulness of the breathing is inherently enjoyable, then its tendency to wander off in search of thoughts and memories will be much reduced.